Our next step is going to be to do the Redgard here, and I've pre-cut a piece of the fiberglass cloth. And I want to point out that when you're working with the fiberglass cloths and even the mesh tape that we use to pre-do the corners, it is a special fiberglass that's been treated to be able to use in the alkaline environments of the cement. According to the manufacturer, Durarock, or USG, they have told me that if you use regular sheetrock-like fiberglass cloth, that because it's not treated in the alkaline environments of the cement, and if it gets wet, it can vacate or leave, dissolve, disappear. So it is important to use the right cloth. Any of the cloth, this one, if you can see on the edge how it says the word Synergy, that's a brand name. Actually, it's backwards. That's a brand name of a product that's made for doing cement coatings. So this cloth is the correct kind. USG makes it for the cement board. So anything that's been made to be used with cement board is going to be the right kind. And I'm just going to kind of pre-mark, and on bigger areas, what I plan on doing is sort of coating out with the Redgard first to get my waterproofing. And this is a small enough one where I could coat the whole thing out with a coat. What we're trying to do is two things. We're trying to waterproof this, and we're also trying to get an anti-fracture membrane. And you want to get enough buildup of the product to actually do the waterproofing. So you can lay out lines of it and pre-coat it, and then put the mesh into the wet Redgard to work it in there. So I'm going to start off with coating it. And I'll move over to this side. And I'm going to go ahead and use a hawk and trowel. I want you can kind of see the consistency of this. Is this why I like this stuff? Is because I always describe it as, it's about the consistency of mayonnaise. So it's fairly easy to work with. There are numerous products on the market for doing this particular job. This has been the one that I like the most. And I'm going to just go ahead and just put a thin coat of Redgard over the entire area where my mesh is going to go. So this is the first coat of my waterproofing process. I've found that you don't want big isolated thick buildups of an elastomeric material under your Milestone. That's why you're pre-filling your joints. If you were to go right over the cement board with this and not have it smoothed out at all, if there are big joints that are filled, sometimes down the road in hot weather or cold weather, they can pooch out or dish in according to how they are. So it's important to have it reasonably smooth underneath it. And you should get about 40 to 50 square feet per gallon if you're getting the right amount of waterproofing out of it. That's what the manufacturers recommend. They have a whole different way that they do it. I kind of have developed my own techniques of how to get my buildup. And in the end, we end up with the same result. Okay, I have it all pre-coated now under where this layer of mesh goes. And I could have coated the whole thing, but I want to emphasize that you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself. And so now I'm going to just sort of set the mesh in there. And the reason that I did that first coat the way I did was so that I could pressure penetrate the Redgard into the base that I had. And now I'm just going to work from one end to the other, pushing the mesh in. Now, my objective is to try to get it nice and flat. I don't want any bubbles in my mesh. And so if you work from the one end to the other, or the middle out, or have a sequence that kind of works for you there. This is the kind of bubble I don't want. Do you see that? That will cause me problems down the road. So I kind of stretch that out of it. And I work my way down the wall and then across the floor. Same sort of a situation, just keep the mesh stretched nice and tight so you don't have to fight with those bubbles. And I wouldn't want to seam this in the same corner and get more buildup because I already have that mesh in that corner. So I'm trying to get out of my corners a little bit with this coat so that I can have it be a little flatter as it comes out of the corner so I can overlap my next layer over this a little bit. Now I'm going to make some darts. And if you're a seamstress, you'll know what that is all about. I'm going to just dart down into the corner so I can get it to lay down good for me. You may cringe if you're a seamstress and say, it's not really doing that right, but that's okay. So then I kind of can fold my bottom in there. I left my little bolts in there because otherwise I fill those little holes with the Redgard and then they become difficult to get back in next time. And the same thing, I'm going to kind of try to keep it all nice and tight. I don't want any big voids coming. And that's why I tend to want to work it from one end to the other. Get it shoved down in the corner. Of course, the floor is going to have quite a coat of material over it, but I still don't want to have a big buildup from the void. And if your base gets a little set up on you, and you're trying to tack things down, you actually can add a little more Redgard as you go. I'm actually going to put a little in my mud tray here. Just to show you that you don't have to use the hot. Oh yeah. And you can add a little more Redgard whenever you need to as you're doing it. Can't probably see that very good. I'm just sort of darting my corner. I want to make sure I have the mesh going around the corner as best as I can. I've used the mesh for two reasons. It forces a good build-up for waterproofing. It also forces a good build-up and reinforces that anti-fracture membrane element of the mesh. your base coat dries out, just add a little more Redgard as you go to help it. Did he find me a razor knife? That's what I got. And this makes a total mess of all your tools, by the way. So you know. Goes from pink to a nice red when it dries. We'll go back to pink down the road if it gets wet. And according to the manufacturer, that's okay. It does not affect the waterproofing of the membrane. Sometimes I call him to find out this stuff because it doesn't say it on the buckets. A lot of the tile people that we work around on job sites will use an anti-fracture membrane on a concrete slab, then it has nothing to do with waterproofing. It has underneath their tile to do with minimizing the potential transfer of hairline cracks up through into the surface. So now what I would do, and you can use a paintbrush with this if you want, like for getting in corners or edges or whatever. I tend to not be real big on the paintbrush method of applying it, but it's sort of whatever works is kind of the name of the game. I guess I have to roll this on the outside, although this is being totally outside of that shower now when I start doing this edge. These scissors probably used to work. They don't much anymore. One more edge to. Now I didn't pre-coat it yet, so I'll do that first. Just like wrapping a present. And we'll mail this off to someone. I guess if you had a void that you couldn't get out, you could always dart it by cutting it. I'd rather see that and think of it as like a little structural knot that doesn't really do too much than leave a big blister sticking out that you got to fight with when you start doing your next coat. My goal is that it would be filled all the way to the top of the mesh when I get this coat done. And that'd be about the right mils of material for the buildup. waterproofing membrane. I am using a Bondo squeegee, and the reason, whenever I'm working with the fiberglass cloth, maybe this is from my old boat building days, but I like the way that a Bondo squeegee doesn't rip up the fibers, and so I don't have to worry about like overworking it or pulling a tear into the cloth in the corners or anywhere. And I'll go back over at the very end. Well, actually, I'm going to do another coat after this, but I'll make sure that I've got a good amount of product worked into the mesh all throughout the whole thing. So you can kind of keep looking it back over. And I want to make sure I have a good fill and contact around my drain. Really important. That's where you actually are making your final seal before the water would wick out. But this will protect your structural framing below your floor and your plywood, so you don't ever have to worry about having to replace and repair your house underneath from some sort of a leak or something. And I don't think that there's any problem with stopping and starting as long as you keep everything pretty flat. It wouldn't stop and start in the middle of a piece of mesh. But I mean, if you had a big shower and you couldn't get it all done in one day, you could leave an edge like I've got here, tapered out, and then come back the next day and do it. That would be acceptable. Blisters in the bottom. If I had a big one, I'd guard it. We kind of end up with almost designated tools to the Redgard because it does make such a mess. It doesn't clean up great. It's a water cleanup, but it's like the other stuff. You got to use the Scotch-Brite on it. I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of this with the squeegee. I sometimes have done floors that had concrete floors that had cracks all over in them. I mean, incredibly bad floors. And I've gone in and done this process on the floor first, then done my base coats just like we're doing, even though I had nothing to do with waterproofing. And I've gone back on those jobs, and it's been pretty amazing to me how well it's kept the cracks from coming through. There's a shop up on 4th Avenue here in Seattle called World Lux. The guy who sells ink pens. You like ink pens, apparently. But anyway, we did his floors. He had some of the worst substrate I've ever seen. I ended up doing an entire coat over his whole floor of this. And then he added on to his shop because he was so successful his pin selling that we had to go back and do more floor and match it all in. So I got to see, several years later, how well it had held up. Quite amazed. There were no cracks. And this floor was divided up with spacers, and I I couldn't quite figure out why it was so bad in the first place. Okay, now we're out there. Darts and those out of the way. I just keep stretching it on as I go. That's kind of the technique. And I would not want to make a cut to get rid of a pocket or a blister in a corner. So if I really had that happen, I would rather kind of work it up, make sure I got my corner laid in there good, and work my way back out of it. Sometimes you can actually grab it and stretch this string, get it laying good. Kind of see how you can work it from one end to the other and kind of stretch it as you go to keep the blisters out of it. A little bit of finesse, but not too hard to work with. It's like making a sandwich. And mayonnaise. And the rest, I think we can let these edges kind of hang rough, and I'll trim them after it dries. I don't have to mess with them right now. Just gonna make sure I don't have any lumps. If you have any lumps, even in this Redgard coat, it really makes it much more difficult for you when you do your next coat. So you want to make sure you got everything laid down good. It does not sand off very easy for the next day type sanding. And I'm going to go back and just sort of make sure all my surfaces appear to be sufficiently filled to the top of the mesh, so that I know I've got my waterproofing good, protection. And I have one more step I'm going to do where I take a little bit of my Redgard and put some sand in it, and I'll coat the surface out just for a little more mechanical tooth for my bond in the final surface. So I want to, in order to get a little more mechanical fastening to my final coat on the shower, I'm going to add a little 70 grit sand into my mix. And I like to put about 1 part sand to 2 parts Redgard. So I have 1 cup of sand here. So I'm going to put 2 of the cups of Redgard into the mix. Easy way to get it in here. This is not on the Redgard instructions. So I've got 2 parts of Redgard to 1 part 70 grit sand. Mix. I'm going to use the mud tray to apply this. I'm just going to put enough to fill the mesh up to the top of the mesh. I don't want any big lumps that I have to deal with when I start plastering. So I want to keep it nice and smooth as I go. You can use a trowel and a hawk if you wish. seems more gentle on the fabric of the cloth as you're putting it on. Kind of look back over, make sure I feel like I've totally filled it up as I come across. This is the minimum number of coats for good waterproofing. You can do more, but I wouldn't recommend less. I don't know if you can see how it just kind of really ends up, this final coat, even though I've already got all those coats on them, you can really sense how it fills the fiberglass cloth up all the way. And you can see it as you're doing it, that you're getting one final buildup. And it's got that sand aggregate in there, so it gives it a little bit more tooth for me to bond my Milestone coats to. And this is where I really like having the Bono squeegees in these corners, so I'm not fighting with the tearing my cloth up there. Where I want the reinforcing the most is where you're the most likely to have trouble with it. So. If the mesh isn't full, you'll see little pinholes in it. And then you know you gotta go back and put a little more. The first job that I did, I took one wall in the garage that was like a foundation wall, and just kept coating it up till I felt like I knew what I was doing. Then I went home and did a fireplace at my own house, and I didn't have a lot of instruction, but I did have a background in plastering. It was pretty extensive. So I just kept playing with it, figuring that, you know, I was not going to be that hard to figure out. I just needed to practice. And so it's the same as for you, you know. I mean, you mess with it for a while and you start realizing what you can do and where you're having trouble, and then you start trying to develop some techniques. And I'm just sort of knocking down little high spots in the Redgard that I can sense are going to produce problems for me when I start plastering this out. Because anything that sticks above the surface very much ends up being something I have to bury. And in theory, if I get anything out an eighth, I can only get rid of it by bringing the whole wall out an eighth to bury that.